of Mark. The women who came to the tomb at dawn carrying spices to anoint Jesus' dead body were told that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you. Jesus had told them he would rise from death on the third day and that he would meet them in Galilee. Well, now it seems he's going ahead of them to keep that promise. The Jesus movement is not over and done with. Earlier this morning at the sunrise at the small boat harbor, I spoke about those brave women who had come to tend Jesus' body, but they were taken by surprise on that first Easter morning. Those words of reminder should have helped them, and they should help us too, to remember other promises that Jesus had made, such as, I go to prepare a place for you, so that where I am, you will be also. Or that promise, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, though they are dead, yet shall they live. That promise, lo, I am with you always, to the end of the age. Because I live, you shall live also. Yes, Jesus left behind not only an empty tomb and an empty cross, not only the folded grave clothes and some grieving friends. Jesus left some promises behind that should bring comfort to us as he goes on ahead. The women and the other disciples hiding out in fear behind the locked doors were certainly in need of some comfort just then. The execution of Jesus, coming about so suddenly from Thursday night to Friday afternoon, raised the inevitable question, the same questions that any death of a loved one brings. Why did this happen? How can we cope with our loss? Will we ever be able to turn this hurt, this pain, into a new purpose? Or is everything over with? What do we do now? To help his followers answer those deeply heartfelt questions, Jesus left some tangible things behind. He left an empty cross, one that we have on our table, one we have beside the lectern. An empty cross. Unlike our Catholic traditions where Jesus is nailed to the cross and we recognize the suffering, here it's the empty cross that gives us the hope and the reminder that the movement continues. They left behind an empty tomb. He left behind empty grave cloths and a young messenger who reminded his followers of the promises that Jesus had made. So we are comforted this Easter, which is now 80 generations after that first Easter. Not because there's no grief or death or burdens in life, but because we know that Jesus has already been there before us, and that he continues to go with us and ahead of us. We're confident this Easter because Jesus always keeps his promises. But we're also challenged by this Easter story. That messenger who met the women at the tomb gave them a task to do. Go and tell. Go, tell his disciples. Tell Peter. This message, which brings comfort, which restores confidence, was not just given for those women, for their comfort. All of Jesus' grieving followers, all of his fear-filled followers needed to be reminded of the promises Jesus had made and the fact that it was not over unless they quit on him. He had done what he could, and now his spirit was in them, and now his desire was in them, and now his strength was in them. But he's going to go ahead of them. Did you notice the special grace of mentioning Peter? Tell the disciples and Peter. You wonder, have they separated out? Or is there something else going on? Well, you know why. Because he blew it badly on that Thursday night, on that Friday morning. 3 times in his fear, Peter had denied even knowing who Jesus was. let alone being one of his followers, let alone being one of the leaders of his movement. We talked about that on Maundy Thursday during our Last Supper upstairs. But apparently, this messenger lets us know that God had already forgiven Peter. Already forgiven him. He wants Peter to know the good news of Easter, that it's for him too. And he wants to get him going along to Galilee as part of that promised reunion. Yes, tell Peter also. I know he denied me. I know he swore he never knew me. I know it's all that much more shocking because he was the one who boasted at the Last Supper that even if they all fall away, I will never deny you. Yes, I know he fell asleep at Gethsemane when I asked him to stay awake and watch and pray. I know. But they all fell asleep. They all scattered. As I said, the good news of Easter wasn't just for those women who heard the news. It was for everyone, including Peter, including us. I guess imperfections never stop God from trying to make good disciples out of us. We can never blow it so badly that God turns God's back and says, no more with you. If Peter got back in the swing of things, thanks to Easter, it's possible for any of us, no matter how low we go, no matter how far we stray, no matter how we deny or betray. It's never over until we say it's over. But I can imagine that young man in that empty tomb, facing those women, scaring them, I suppose. He said, come on, girls, you can do this. You are about to become Jesus' first Easter evangelists. Just follow through on this one thing. All you have to do is go and tell, go, preach it. Isn't that just like Jesus for you? He picks his first preachers and it turned out they're all women. Love women preachers. But Mark tells us the women were frightened. They were so frightened by the unexpected turn of events that they fled from the tomb. And according to Mark 16:8, they told no one anything. With those words being the original ending of Mark's gospel, it leaves us wondering, well, what's going to happen now? If they don't tell the story, it's going to die. If they don't tell the Easter story, who will? And I think that's the point that Mark wanted to make. See, we are all of us given the task of telling the story of Jesus' continuing presence and continuing aliveness and living presence. We are all of us given that task to start again in Galilee, where it all began, and tell it again from the get-go, but this time knowing that it won't end. The task has not changed during all the centuries of the Christian church. It's still our challenge on this Easter morning, and it's still our choice. Either we're going to go out and go tell, or we're just going to go out and go to lunch. We go out and tell, or we don't. Not only does the future of ministry of this 156-year-old congregation here in Alpena depend on us getting up and getting out and telling others the good news of Jesus, the entire spiritual movement that was begun by Jesus to repair, to restore, to reform the world so it would be the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. That movement is always at risk of dying out if we fail to communicate it to others. It's been said the church is always only one generation away from dying out, because it relies on the current active members to tell others the Jesus gospel in such a way that they want to become involved themselves, that they want their lives to change for the better, like you've shown yours has changed. The events following that first Easter provided enough evidence for the early church to believe that Jesus was still with them. Everybody said he was. They could see the lives changing. They saw the boldness of these disciples. They saw how everything was turned around. So they knew there was something real to it. as he had promised. That his Spirit would continue to guide them. His Spirit would continue to be with them, continue to gather them and to strengthen them. You know, we don't know how much time passed before those frightened women finally told somebody what they'd experienced. But we know they must have done so. Jesus' movement was resurrected. And we're here as living proof. We wouldn't be here if it had died out there because the cat had their tongue. The events of Easter should provide comfort to those of us who mourn our losses, the losses of our loved ones, because we know Jesus goes ahead of us. And knowing that we have a companion along the days of our journey and in the path of our loneliness. Jesus has been there, and he's been there ahead of us. He's been there with us, and he will be going ahead of us into the future. Wherever our future leads us, he's already been there ahead of us. As the 23rd Psalm says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Jesus, we are told, was called Emmanuel, which simply means God is with us. God incarnate, God with flesh on. Jesus goes ahead of us in daily life, and goes ahead of us in our death, and goes ahead of us into resurrection and beyond. The Easter experience should give us the courage to carry our own cross to the end, knowing that Christ is with us. He carried his, we carry ours. We're in this thing together. And his happy ending, his victory over death, is our happy ending. Knowing that Christ is with us, and knowing that Christ goes ahead of us.